Countrywide Connect with Andy Thompson and Sarah Perriam-Lamp.
Interesting press release came through yesterday, and I thought we might have a chat about this. A Green Party's private members' bill seeking to prohibit new mining and extractive activity on conservation land is causing serious concern across New Zealand's quarry and aggregate sector. The industry argues that the proposal could effectively lock up major aggregate reserves needed for roads, rail, water infrastructure and housing construction. Wayne Scott from the Aggregate and Quarry Association is joining me now. Wayne, g'day mate. Welcome to the show. Really appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us.
No problem, Andy.
Hey, so, okay, I've done a wee intro there as to what the issue is. Why are you so concerned about not being able to access quarrying and on conservation estate? Because on the face of it, a lot of people would be going, shouldn't be doing it on the conservation estate anyway.
Yeah, that's right. I think people get a bit confused about the conservation estate and what is national parks and what is just general government administered land. And a lot of the land we're talking about is actually government administered land. There are some quarries on the national parks, but they tend to be operated by DOC themselves to repair tracks, and most of those are small scale and intermittent. But what we're talking about really is the access to rivers. A lot of strips along riverbanks are administered by the DOC estate. So we have a lot of access agreements to get into rivers to extract gravel. There's about 40 at last count quarries that operate on the DOC estate, either extracting from the DOC estate or access arrangements through the DOC estate to get to the gravel. And GNS did some work a couple of years ago on the future of quarrying in New Zealand, and about 25% of the accessible gravel and sand was actually on or needed access from the DOC estate.
Wayne, are we talking predominantly Schedule 4 land here on the DOC estate?
No, we're not. As I say, the Schedule 4 stuff, the odd quarry that operates on Schedule 4 under concession tends to be for DOC's purposes.
Right. So this is just land that is effectively in the estate, but is pretty much general. Yeah. So rivers. So how much then of New Zealand's aggregate comes from these, from the estate?
Wouldn't have the exact number on that, but about a third of our gravel and sand comes from alluvial operations, so rivers or river banks. Not all of it's on the DOC estate, but certainly some of it is. As I say, last count there was about 40 active operations on and around the DOC estate in the country.
So what is the Greens bill, what is the private members bill actually asking for? Does it want all current extraction to cease, or is it talking about new?
We've actually written to the Land Fam to get some clarification as to what it actually entails. The bill's possibly going to be presented for first reading this week, we're not sure. But it was drawn out of the tin last week. So we don't really have the detail. The difficulty is when people talk about mining, if you take the Crown Minerals Act definition, it is basically everything. So it's Pounamu, and the majority of Pounamu is extracted through alluvial gold mining on the DOC estate. So it impacts, some people have the perception that mining is these big nasty holes in the ground and gold and coal and that sort of thing, but mining by definition in New Zealand is a raft of other things.
Yeah, I think people. I'm based on the West Coast. I know exactly how this works, and even alluvial gold mining is not much more than just washing stones. And just explain to the listeners how they do get the greenstone, because it's actually quite a it's quite a hit and miss. Well, not hit and miss, but it's really just spotting it, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's a bit like gold, really. And in fact, you often find greenstone where there's gold and vice versa. So hence the fact that a large chunk of it is a byproduct, if you like, of alluvial gold mining. Obviously, the miners don't have the rights to it. Iwi have the rights to it, but certainly, I think last time I saw some data, it was about 80% of all the Pounamu extracted, particularly on the West Coast, is from alluvial gold mining.
Yeah, basically it comes off the back of the screen, falls on the ground, and someone just spots it and go, "There's a bit of there's some pounamu." It's very much an analog way of finding it. That's pretty much how it works. I guess with this, Wayne, do we underestimate how important aggregate is to our industries, to our sector?
Yeah, I think we do. I mean, we are huge consumers of aggregate and sand by world standards. In fact, we're the third largest country per head of population consumer of aggregate and sand in the world. There's only China and Canada that consume more than we do per head of population. And that's mainly because we've got 110,000 kilometres of road for 5 million people. Yeah.
One of the things I noticed in the press release, which I thought was interesting, and I think it's right for you to point it out, is unless we can extract aggregate from areas close to where we need it, our emission profile goes through the roof, right?
Yeah, it does. It does. I mean, aggregate and sand is a high volume, low value product. As soon as you put it on a truck, the cost actually doubles after 30 kilometres travel. But you've got all that congestion, 90,000 trucks a day in Auckland at the moment, carrying aggregate.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it seems to be accessible in places where it's not it's not always needed, aka the West Coast. There's plenty of it around here.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And yeah, that can be the case. Unfortunately, it is where it is. Sand and aggregate is where it is. So whilst we've got a lot of it in New Zealand, there are areas you can't get access to for various reasons. But yeah, it tends to be where it is. We're lucky that most of the time we're on urban fringes, rural land on urban fringes, so we can get quite close to market.
What are you actually asking for here? Do you just want this this bill chucked out, or some amendments to it? What are you actually asking for?
Well, we're asking for clarification. I don't think the bill will get passed. I don't think with this government it'll get beyond first reading, to be honest. But we've had sort of murmurings for the previous government had a policy around no new mines on conservation land that wasn't clear either. So every time this notion that we just need to stop all extraction on conservation land, we get a bit excited about that, because there was a lot of it going on already, and in the future there could be more of it because of the demand for aggregate and sand. So we want to see what the bill entails in some detail, and we want to know whether in fact mining includes all extraction, or is it limited to certain things that the Greens don't like.
So I guess, just to play devil's advocate here a little bit, are you just attempting to shore up mining and using the aggregate and quarrying and the sands as kind of like a smokescreen?
No, not at all. I don't represent the mining industry. The Minerals Council speak on their behalf. I'm purely speaking on behalf of aggregate suppliers, aggregate and sand suppliers, your limestone producers, those sorts of things. Purely on mainly construction materials and agricultural materials is what we do.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, there's obviously some crossover between the two, and it is good to. I also worry about thin end of the wedge stuff when it comes to these sort of I suppose bills or policies, because you don't know where they're going to end, do you, when they get a wee toehold?
That's right, and the blanket banning of stuff really is fraught with unintended consequences. We've seen that in numerous pieces of legislation over the years, where attempts to ban things suddenly capture all sorts of other things that weren't intended. So I think case by case is always a lot better. If it doesn't shape up in terms of environmental impacts and social impacts, then it's not going to stack up, right? So things should be considered based on the individual circumstances of the applications.
Yeah, I agree with you. Blanket bans never ever work, and I think we've proven that over the years. All right, Wayne, really appreciate your time. Chief Executive Officer, Aggregate and Quarry Associations of New Zealand. Great to come in and just to get a bit of clarity on this and understand just how important this industry is to us, because whether it's construction or farming or whatever it is, we need access to these raw materials, and particularly lime, by the way. I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's a fairly important product to us.
Certainly is.
All right, mate. Really appreciate your time.
Okay.
Countrywide Connect with Andy Thompson and Sarah Perriam Lapp.